Coming up on WordBirds.
We are, in a way, our worst enemies, right? We seek perfection, and many of us, especially CMOs, as you know, because I'm sure you're in that category or that type as well. We're very type A, right? Like, we want to do well things, we want to build stuff, everything has to be awesome. I'm a heckler for mistakes, right? When I see typos or bad formatting. Um, so I do, I'm in that sense very type A. But I've come to realize that sometimes when, let's say, a piece of content is like a 90% complete, to get it to that 100% that you naturally would drive it to, the effort that takes and that additional time it takes stands in the way of applying that energy to something else. It's just not always worth it.
Today on the show, I'm talking to Gabi Zijderveld. Gabi is the CMO at SmartEye, the human insight company. SmartEye is AI that understands, supports, and predicts human behavior in complex environments. We're going to be talking about how to ask the right questions to get your why, how shifting gear and changing direction in crisis is a no-lose scenario, and how most times, good enough is good enough. Let's sit back and get some insight from the fly.
What could you do with a 90% reduction in content errors, a 70% increase in content quality, and a 60% reduction in content editing costs? Probably what our customers are already doing. And that's creating better content faster. Acrolinks, the amazing content company.
Got ahead of myself. Gabi, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. As always, great to talk to you.
This is very exciting. It's going to be a great conversation. So let's get started. I want to drop right into the quick fire. Quick, short answers, and then we're going to come back and we're going to drill into them. What's the best and most successful campaign content you've been involved in?
It was the best, I think, but maybe even more the most memorable and the weirdest. And it was the book launch and book tour for our CEO's book. It's a tech-infused memoir called Girl Decoded. And it all happened in April 2020. It was weird.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to talk to them about
Yeah.
that. What was your worst content campaign?
That was about 10 years ago. I was at IBM and we were working on the messaging and especially a website and more educational in nature on a very techie topic, KVM. And it sucked, and I'll tell you later why.
So out of the two of those, which are fantastic examples, which one did you learn the most from?
Oh, the last one, that technical messaging and website that was disastrous, and we fixed it. I learned a lot and still have that in the back of my mind.
So let's talk about that one. Tell me a little bit more about what that was.
Okay, so I had just moved from one division to a completely different division in IBM, and it was in the Linux team. And in itself, really interesting because IBM didn't sell Linux distributions, but uh, but Linux influenced the sale of hardware, software, and services to the amount of $6 billion a year. It's a big deal for IBM, and years later they would buy Red Hat. And KVM, kernel-based virtual machine, was an open source hypervisor. And I had just joined that team a week prior, and we were tasked by the second person in IBM to create a market for this thing. Now, I knew jack about what that all meant. And I teamed up with a coworker who was super nice and who had been in the virtualization space for quite some time. I really liked working with him, and he tried to explain it all to me. And together we were tasked within a week of standing up messaging and a completely new kind of website, or at least a homepage and a few pages underneath. And as we're working on it, I was enjoying this partnership with this new colleague, but I really didn't get it. And we're writing all this stuff. And I'm like, what the hell is this supposed to mean? And then eventually we finalize, the first near concept and ready to show it to our executives. And my boss's boss, I will never forget. She looked at that homepage with our goobly goop on it. And she said, "What do you think? Your clients are stupid?" And it stuck because I just sat there and I'm like, yeah, this is shit. Like, I don't even understand it. How, why didn't I push back, right? Why? And yeah, so that in itself was a huge lesson learned, and we can talk more about that later. But essentially, she sent us back to the drawing board, and that's when I started what I like to call my why questions. Why does this exist? Why does it matter? Why are people paying money for this? Why is this making companies better? Why? It's kind of those toddler questions, right? They always
Yep.
ask, why? But by digging into it, I finally got the answer so I could understand it. And then I could put my product marketing hat on and create something that made sense. But it was, what do you think? Your clients are stupid? I will never forget that.
It's a great entry to a new technology overview. It really,
Yeah,
really
so
builds
good.
you up. Makes you
Yeah,
feel good
yeah.
about your work.
Oh my God. And
Uh,
honestly, when she said that, I was so pissed off. I'm like, what? Because I'd been doing this stuff for quite some time. So you have maybe a bit of an ego. And then after I calmed down a bit, I was like, oh my God, she's so right. It's the best feedback I've gotten in ages. She's so right. And we fixed it. And then it was good. And it became awesome.
but that's interesting. Is really thinking through the full picture of the why as to what you're creating, and then building the message around that why versus just taking things from the technology group, turning them into readable content and putting them out into the world, because that doesn't always tell the story that's going to be consumed by the audience you're creating it for. Even though in this case, you were communicating something very technical and kind of boring. Um,
Oh,
you,
yeah. Yeah.
you still needed to tell the story that was going to pull people in.
Yeah. And I think I will also not forget that. I think one of the big points around this technology is that people, the target audiences really thought it was some esoteric technology that wasn't ready to deploy it in the enterprise. And I think our headline on the page was KVM ready for business. And then a few layers down, you had all that tech talk and the geeky stuff that you needed to have there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was that attention grabbing thing that it was kind of like normal talk, right? Like how people talk to each other, right? Rather than this complicated tech talk that doesn't make any sense. But the
I,
why,
I, lo-
I love the why questions, and also later at Affectiva when we created the category of emotion AI, we really focused on that messaging, and it was all about the why, right? Why does this exist? What's the raison d'être, as the French would say? Why does it exist? Why are we building this? Why are we better at this than anyone else? Why would someone pay money for this? Why would this be used in healthcare, education, automotive, you name it? And
well,
to this day,
it's
I
a
come back to that.
it's a great way of talking about the need for the solution, and I think that's been a thread that we've heard. If you're listening to this show right now and you've listened to the last 3 or 4 episodes of this season, this has been a thread that's come through every episode, and I'm not surprised because of the people that I'm talking to, that identifying the actual need in the marketplace
Ah,
within the persona that you're selling to, finding that emotion that keeps somebody up versus just telling people what your solution is. Like, this is what we
yes.
do. You should just know the thing we do. No, I want to find the why of why this matters to you. And I've heard that from literally every guest on the show this season, is that the why, the emotion behind it, the reasoning behind it, the thing that's going to make it interesting to the people that are potentially going to buy this product is the difference between success and failure. Just saying this is a thing, here you go, doesn't engage with the audience. It might provide value overview, it might provide a whole lot of things, but if you don't understand why I would look at it, what would attract me, why I would read it, it just isn't going to work. And I feel like that's exactly what you corrected. Was, here's a thing, now here's why you care about that thing.
Yeah, and I love how you're describing it, and that's exactly it. And I think we all at times lose sight of it, and too many tech companies out there frequently lose sight of it. I'm sure you see it all the time too, and we all get on these unsolicited emails, and it's like, "Ugh, you have not touched on why I would care about this,
Uh-huh.
right?"
Yeah,
And
well, I mean, for years we've been talking about goals, governance, and guidance. Here, let me tell you about what we do. It's goals, governance, and guidance. I would like you to tell me, in your life, when was the last time that you woke up in the middle of the night thinking, I forgot about goals, governance, and guidance. I need to do that tomorrow. And the answer, I'll save you some time, is never. You've never
Yeah.
had that. But if we talk about like a persona of a content marketer at a bank, when was the last time they woke up thinking about regulatory compliance or complexity of the content that they're trying to deliver because of the financial regulations and rules in the space? Like, that's a thing. And
Yeah.
how do we address those things? That's a problem that somebody has. You don't know that you have a problem with goals, governance, and guidance. I would suggest
Yeah.
that you do, but you don't know that. And now
But you
I'm
don't
going to have to,
articulate it that way. So that phrasing doesn't ring a bell with you because you don't
yeah,
think in those terms.
I'm selling you medicine to a disease that you've never heard of and you don't know you have, and I need to convince you that you have it, versus
That's great
finding the
enough.
thing that you have that you know literally my arm hurts. Cool. Let me tell you what we do for your arm. And so many companies, so many marketing organizations don't do that. They just go it like, this is what we have. And
Yeah, I love how you said that. I'm selling you a medicine for a disease you don't have. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it happens too much, and it irks me beyond belief. But
it
yeah,
really
it's
is. And the companies that do well are the ones that are putting candy balls out in the front of their house on Halloween with whole candy bars. Like, here's the thing. And you just immediately understand it. You're like, I'm going to go and I'm going to try the candy. And the companies that are selling medicine are standing over at the side. Why am I losing all my leads to these other companies? Well, because they've identified what I want. My pain point is I like candy and I'm going to go get some.
exactly.
Fantastic. Looking at your best and most memorable campaign, tell me a little bit about the book tour.
Yeah, so that was really quite something. So our CEO, Rana El Kalyoubi, she's founder and CEO. We've since gotten acquired by the company SmartEye, where she and I to this day both work. We effectively merged our two companies. But she was CEO. She is a, fairly young computer scientist that studied, grew up in the Middle East, got her PhD in Cambridge, UK, then came to Cambridge, Mass, to the MIT Media Lab. From there, she spun out the company Affectiva with her co-founder. So scientist turned entrepreneur, Middle Eastern woman, single mom, as you can tell now, checks all the boxes, right? And super interesting profile. And she's very charismatic, great speaker, really fantastic person. She's become a very good friend over the 8+ years I've worked with her. She had an opportunity. By the way, she's now recognized as an AI thought leader, and that started about 6 years ago, where her business profile, her tech profile, really started rising. And we also started that category of emotion AI. So she was a very unique persona in tech and in the rapidly emerging new AI space. And she had an opportunity to write a memoir that was offered to her by Penguin Random House. And part of me was like, you're like, what, 39, 40 years old? What do you mean you're writing a memoir? And by the way, you're CEO, you don't have time for this. But then on the other hand, and the running joke, by the way, was that I was her CMO, but also her CNO, her chief no officer. So I said, no, you don't have time for that. But of course, when Penguin Random House comes knocking, that, they want you to write your memoir, you're not going to back down, right?
No.
I got it. So I saw this book coming rapidly and spoke to her a lot about it. I was even in some meetings with Penguin Random House, where we went to New York and met that team. All super awesome. She got like a publicist who focuses on literature. She had a literary agent. Oh, this whole space that I hadn't really, you hear about it, but I'd never worked in it before. So that was just interesting in itself. And had an opportunity to read early versions of the book and give feedback, which she considered. So all super lovely. And then, of course, the book's going to launch April 20th, 2020.
Perfect
And she
timing.
has this fantastic book tour lined up, television appearances, the typical enchilada that also a Penguin Random House with a good publicist will line up for you. And as we know now, the whole thing came falling apart. So, of course, she is freaking out because this is her book. She wants it to be a bestseller, and it got on a Washington Journal or Washington Post bestseller list. So she did achieve that. But totally freaking out. And at one point, I said, "Rana, it's okay. We'll do a virtual book launch and a virtual book tour." And let's go talk to Penguin Random House. And they're like, what? No idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, and we just started brainstorming ideas. I'm like, we're just going to do it. It was amazing. So we very much, it was obviously very content heavy. We focused on the book. We had excerpts of it. The book had various themes. We did a humongous press outreach. I think she got something like 110 pieces of media coverage for the book. So we, as a marketing team, we basically invented a whole series of LinkedIn live streams. And mind you, this is very early on in the pandemic when no one was yet sick and tired of all this online nonsense. And she was able to get all these noteworthy tech and AI luminaries to come on her live streams because these people were stuck at home as well. You could never get them
Right.
because they would always be traveling, but they're at home and they're like, yeah, I'll come on. And we had these amazing live streams. I think we did like 15, maybe 18 of them, over 80,000 viewers from like 100 countries or something ridiculous like that. She did a lot of podcasts, including the Tim Ferriss podcast. We would send these pre-order email blasts that had open rates of like 40%. Like I've never seen emails that had an open rate of 40%, right? So oddly enough, in this really horrible time, right, we're at the height of the pandemic. Thousands of people around the world are dying every single day. People, especially in the US, were stressed out beyond belief. Somehow we managed to pull off this amazing book launch and book tour that lasted a good half year. And it generated all this content that we could milk for a long time after that and build on and chop up into little pieces and send it out over different channels. And yeah, we did a virtual book party when the book launched. That was hilarious. And so suddenly her parents in Egypt or so, or maybe at the time they were in Dubai, they were able to join because otherwise they probably would have never traveled to the
Right.
US for a book party at some kind of bookstore or something. And so we had a few hundred people join the virtual live stream. We created this virtual goodie bag for everyone where we basically had, I think, some Dropbox file with all this cool stuff in it, like Rana's favorite recipe. And she loves to do Zumba. So a little video of Rana doing some Zumba instruction, like all this like crazy stuff. And she's like, yeah, I'm game. We had a lot of fun with it. But you know what the interesting thing was after all was said and done? She was still very upset that all her in-person appearances, of course, had gotten cancelled. But including I think a TED talk that would have been an audience of 700 people. But we reached tens of thousands of people around the world doing this virtually in the height of the pandemic when people were stuck at home and getting bored out of their mind after about a month of it, into it. And the reach was way bigger than a traditional in-person book launch and book tour would have ever been. So against all expectations, it ended up being a really good success, and it was weird and fun and quite memorable. So for that reason, I would qualify it as my best.
I mean, it's kind of amazing because if I'm sure that book tours are great, and if that had happened in the world, good things would have happened. But the amplification
Yeah,
that you got out of moving it, like shifting gears and moving that to the cloud, allowed such a much broader audience from a wider area to participate in that it had to have a downstream impact in the actual success of the book that
yeah,
you wouldn't have had in person. It would have been cool to walk into a room and have people clap for you and do your reading and whatever. Like, that's really neat. I would love to do that. But at the end of the day, if you care about getting your content out, this was fantastic. And the byproduct of it is all the additional content that you got that you continue to get to use.
exactly. And we would have never had that if it had taken place the traditional way. Not
No,
to
I
that
mean,
extent.
it's a great example of being able to creatively solve a problem and shift gears very
Yeah,
quickly, but also to create that reusable content that becomes the basis of so many other things that you're going to
yeah,
do.
yeah.
That,
And
to be fair,
yeah,
if you stood in a room at the Barnes and Noble in, I don't know, New York City, you wouldn't have guests, you wouldn't have people coming on, you wouldn't have tech luminaries.
yeah,
All of this is
exactly.
more valuable. It's just complete amplification.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, we prepped really well. So when we would get these luminaries on, we would often get, if they were working at a company, we'd get their teams and their marketing teams involved, and we'd prep and we'd brief them, and we'd also package up promotional content, right? Like, here's a sample tweet, here is a banner for LinkedIn that has the guest speaker and Rana together with our branding. So we spend a lot of time prepping and creating materials that we could give to them and basically say, here's a package, can you please promote it? And they all
Mhm.
would, and even more amplification. It
Yeah.
was quite something else. And we were just in this like go 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 mode, right? Especially also because our CEO, whom we all really liked working with and had been working with for a long time, she was so, I guess, distraught, right? And we were like, we're going to make this awesome. And it was all hands on deck at a time when we were all kind of stuck at home. And we kind of had a blast, but it wasn't until maybe a year later or so, I think my PR agency, who was very heavily involved, and they were exceptional in this whole exercise. About a year later, I think maybe we were invited to speak about this or write an article about it, or maybe a podcast. I think we did both of them. So it gave us an opportunity to reflect on what we had done a year before, and we kind of sat back and we're like, "Oh my God, that was actually amazing! What we as a group managed to pull off with the support of this institution that's Penguin Random House." And I didn't think we realized it at the time because we were just going.
Yep.
But afterwards, it's like, wow, that was something else.
And
It
it's,
was
I
so
mean,
cool.
it's interesting that you had, I'll call it a natural disaster, a global natural disaster that forced you into this situation. But I'm hearing like the takeaway for me is that you don't necessarily need that natural disaster. Things fall in front of our campaigns all the time.
Yeah,
And if you can shift gears, find that excitement and the creativity, like this kind of outcome is possible, but you have to be willing to do that. You didn't just say, well, this sucks.
yeah,
Shifted gears. This is what we're doing now. Took control and moved in a different direction, and that direction worked. And so often we see people that like the wall drops and it's like, well, I can't go anywhere. There's a wall in front of me. And
yeah,
taking that decision to say, we're going to give this a shot and see what happens. There's only two things that could happen. One, it's going to be great, and one, it's going to suck.
yeah.
But if you
What
sit,
do you have
but
to
if you
lose?
sit in one place, it's definitely going to suck.
Yeah, exactly. We had nothing to lose, and I remember when she was so upset, and I just blurted it out. We're gonna do a virtual launch, virtual book tour. I had no idea what the hell that was. But then
Yeah, that was
everyone's like, "Oh, okay," and we brainstormed. We got some people together, and because you're absolutely right, if we hadn't done something, the whole thing sucked anyways, right? Like it was a really bad time, and you look around you in the world, it's scary as hell and super sad and just shocking to see what's going on in the world. And here we are in a little microcosm, right? And we're just kind of inventing something awesome in this on a really small scale, and it made a lot of people happy and it engaged a lot of people. The live streams, it was so fun, right? Like we're all prepped, ready to go, and I have my team on the back end running the live stream, and then someone is live tweeting or something like that. And I would often be on the live stream chat, and I'd be like, "Hi, this is Gabi. I'm in Somerville, Massachusetts. Where are you all from?" And then suddenly these people are like, "Oh, hi, I'm like in Norway. I'm in South Africa. Hi from China." It's like amazing. You don't get that with a TED talk in
no,
Austin
no. You get people from
or South
Austin,
by Southwest. South by Southwest. That's what it was actually, not a TED talk. South by Southwest.
but there are
Anyways,
public scooters in Austin, and I love public scooters. Big
oh,
fan.
you do? Those
Oh, I
scare
do.
me. I'm not going to
No,
get on one. I'll fall off.
my office is in Berlin, and there's public scooters in Berlin. That's how I
Yeah,
commute to work. It's the best. Such a fan. It's just a little bit of freedom.
yeah.
Also, I tend to wear red pants, so I stand out in Berlin because I'm the guy in the red pants on the scooter scooting to work. Anyway,
I love that. I
it's
love that. There goes
it's
an American who
yeah,
speaks so
yeah,
much.
exactly. Fantastic. So, last section, like to touch on the PSOTD. That is the provocative statement of the day. It is a, a a belief that you hold that maybe other people don't agree with, but that you think is kind of important and interesting.
Yeah, it's for me, it's good enough is good enough. And I can
Okay,
explain
go
why
on.
people have. Okay. And actually, I think it has some affinity, not entirely the same, but close to perfection is the enemy of progress. And I think it
Hmm.
was actually Winston Churchill, right, that said that. It's a famous quote of his. But what it really, in my world in tech and when you create content, um, we are in a way our worst enemies, right? We seek perfection, and many of us, especially CMOs, as you know, because I'm sure you're in that category or that type as well, we're very type A, right? Like we want to do well things, we want to build stuff, everything has to be awesome. I'm a heckler for mistakes, right? When I see typos or bad formatting, ooh. um, so I do, I'm in that sense very type A. But I've come to realize that sometimes when, let's say, a piece of content is like a 90% complete, to get it to that 100% that you naturally would drive it to, the effort that takes and that additional time it takes stands in the way of applying that energy to something else. It's just not always worth it. And again, with that same CEO, Rana Al Kalyoubi, I remember she and I would work on a lot of content. We'd co-write bylines and a whole host of things. And it was really quite interesting work. Always started with brainstorming and making an outline. And one of our content stars at the PR agency, she and I would draft things, and we circle back. And, it was a really fun process. But then often we'd get to this point that it was nearly done. And then it was like, but what about this? But what about that? And I remember just having to take her aside and tell her, it's good enough. And she said to me, well, but are you advocating for mediocrity? I'm like, absolutely not. Like, absolutely not. I don't do mediocre work. Never, ever. It's just that when we think about the audience and who we're writing this for, what we have brought to 90% is really interesting enough. It serves the purpose, it serves the need, it achieves why we set out to do this. And to get it that 100% that you envision or that I might envision, all the time and effort that it takes to get it there, that time and effort is better spent on something else that's going to move the needle or the next piece of content we want to work on. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. And I'm like, okay, so let's just fix those last things we talked about. We can do that in half an hour's work and then just get it done. Good enough. She's like, okay. And then I kept very frequently with my team or with her bump into these issues where I'd be like, good enough. And then I think it was maybe a year later. Again, we're working on such a project and we're kind of discussing how to bring it over the finish line. And she starts brainstorming stuff and she stops herself mid-sentence. And she's like, Gabi, I think it's good enough. And I'm like, I agree. Good enough.
There it
Okay,
is.
package it up. Done. So, yeah, we don't always have to bring it to our own level of perfection. We have to keep focused on the need it serves, the audience we're serving with that content. And often, good enough is good enough. But that doesn't mean it has to be mediocre because, yeah, I don't do mediocre. I really don't. So that's my statement. Good enough is good enough.
I like that statement. Gabi, thank you for being on the show. This was fantastic. Such a great time.
Thank you so much. I have so much fun talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to WordBirds. WordBirds is hosted by Chris Willis, produced by Charlotte Baxter Reed, and brought to you by Acrolinks. For more information on Acrolinks, visit www.acrolinks.com.